say none harm. I think none harm. And if this be not enough to keep a man alive, then in good faith I long not to live.
Welcome to the 100 Catholic Movies podcast. I'm Cameron,
I'm Sam.
And I'm Joe.
and today we are going to be looking at Christopher Nolan's filmography. So, what we're going to be doing is we'll be ranking his films. But before that, I did want to ask you all, what was your first memory of seeing a Christopher Nolan film?
For me, actually, now I have to think about this. If it was the first theatrical one was Interstellar in IMAX, and that blew my mind. But I think I had to have seen. I was already sort of on the Nolan hype train by then, so I think Batman Begins would have been my first one for sure. And then I think it was a while before I watched the other Dark Knight movies. But that was just like it was my dad who showed me, and he was just like my dad was what he showed me a lot of like foundational movies. So this was like my gateway sort of into Batman, and that just like blew my mind as well. Just like I started reading a whole bunch of Batman comics after that, became like completely entranced by the mythology. Um, but Interstellar was the one where like also remember that was around the time I started actually following the trades and stuff. And there was just like there was not a whole lot of details on Interstellar, and that was super intriguing to me. And it was the trailers were vague, the marketing was there was yeah, it's just this it was hyped up to be this big event, and for me at least it definitely paid off. It sort of I guess had a reappraisal in recent years. Like definitely there were passionate people who were passionate about it upon its release, but I think like now 10 years later, it's like a certified classic, especially after seeing it again in IMAX with packed theater, and like it made so much money just in that IMAX run last year, late last year for its 10th anniversary. So um yeah, and this is one of the few filmographies of a filmmaker that I've actually completed. I mean, I guess there's some like newer directors where I watch like if they have two or three films, I've watched them, but like for like a 10 plus film filmography, yeah, for me to have completed that says something about how much I'm into a certain filmmaker.
Yeah, and also the just universal appeal. Like without even trying, before we had this podcast on the docket, I think I'd seen about 80 or 90% of his films just because they were
Yeah.
a big deal and they were so good and everyone saw them and everyone talked about them. Uh,
Yeah.
like I think him and probably Wes Anderson, those two kind of modern filmmakers, it's just they make a lot of good films and we all go see them. And it's not a niche thing where you have to put a lot of effort in to go complete the filmography.
Yeah,
They're
they're and there's something you can expect that they're consistent in quality. Like even if like you don't, even if I mean we'll get into some of these. Even if you're not necessarily moved by the story, you still go see them in theaters because it is an experience and there's stuff worth seeing. Like in a sense, I would say all of these are worth watching. But as to there's some movies I've seen like 10 times, and there's some movies that I've seen once and I'm like that was enough, but I'm glad I saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Basically, everything that Nolan puts out, whether or not I like it, I always find myself thinking about it afterwards. And even some of
Yeah.
the sneakier ones. So we'll talk about Insomnia, which I just watched recently. I found myself days afterwards coming back to different things about it. And, that's sort of considered one of his lesser films, even. Something like The Prestige, Inception, Interstellar, the Batman films, all of them, you find yourself thinking about them for a long, it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
not just a satisfying emotional experience. They really engage you on a deeper level. And I think that's something that sets Nolan apart from most other modern, at least modern blockbuster filmmakers.
Right. Yeah, he's able to combine the blockbuster punch with something a little more intellectual that, leaves you something to chew on. You go
Yeah.
see a Marvel movie or like Indiana Jones or something, and it's fun. There's a lot of effects, but you kind of forget about it. Whereas here, they're fun in some ways. They have a lot of effects, but they also have a whole another layer. And if you go on YouTube, there's millions of YouTube video essays of people trying to unravel and trying to figure out what he's trying to do. I love
Yeah.
that about films. So it kind of speaks to both of those levels.
Yeah. So what was the first movie for you, Cameron, that you watched of his?
Yeah, I'm with you, Sam. I was at a friend's house, and I was probably 10 or 11, and we were just playing around outside, and we went upstairs to the attic and put on a movie, and it was Batman Begins. I had no idea who Christopher Nolan was, but I was immediately hooked. I love a good origin story. It was very real. It wasn't too fantastical. It was very grounded in reality. And I was hooked immediately. And I saw the movie. I loved it, but I didn't really connect it with Christopher Nolan until years later. But I just remember it really stuck out to me as something that was just a really well-crafted film. And again, an origin story, a hero who's human. But it was a really kind of, it sticks out to me. And yeah, it's one of
Yeah.
those moments of my childhood watching movies that I'll always remember. And then my first time going to a theater to see a quote unquote like PG-13 adult movie was seeing Inception. And it was, believe it or not, it was my parents who were like, "Oh, I've heard this is really good." So we
Yeah.
had a family movie trip to the theater, and I think I've seen every movie he's released in theaters since then.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Inception was also the first of his movies I saw in theaters, but it was on a re-release during COVID, actually,
Oh yeah, I went to
in
that too.
2020.
Yeah.
But the first Nolan movie that I saw was actually The Dark Knight Rises.
Mm.
I watched the Batman movies in reverse order my freshman year of college, and
That's crazy.
yeah, got really into them. They were awesome, and I loved them. But
Yeah.
my friend at the time thought that basically they were the reverse order was the order of how good they were. He liked Dark Knight Rises, then Dark Knight,
Oh
Batman
yeah.
Begins.
Huh.
And so we watched them in that order, and which was a unique experience. But I do think that they are all sort of self-contained enough films that you can do that without getting too lost. If you try to do that with
Yeah.
like Star Wars, you might have some problems. But
Yeah.
I liked that, and then also in college, Inception, The Prestige, saw those films. They were great. Waited on Interstellar for a while, and I'm not really sure why. I think you're right that there was a moment there, maybe in like the late 2010s, where Interstellar was kind of overlooked.
Yeah.
And then maybe after Tenet, or as the Oppenheimer hype was starting to build,
Oppenheimer.
The Oppenhype, yes. The Interstellar sort of appreciation really kicked back in, and I watched it 2 or 3 years ago, and really enjoyed it. Had lots of thoughts about it, but we can get there. But
Yeah.
it's that experience of watching Interstellar made me hungry to watch all the rest of his films. I saw Tenet in theaters, and then just recently kind of wrapped up the last few films I was missing, and we can talk
Yeah.
about them because they're all interesting.
I watched Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises, then Dark Knight. So I I also have watched them out of order, which was made yeah, it was an interesting viewing experience, but it worked actually. I agree they are standalone.
Shall we tier
I think,
list?
yeah,
Yeah,
let's
let's
do
do
it.
it.
Let's do it.
All right. I got following up first because we're gonna go in chronological order.
The
Um,
following is interesting because this is completely an independent film that Nolan and his brother made with some of their friends. They sort of shot guerrilla style on the streets of London, which is
yeah.
always fun to see. And they were using actual film cameras. This is before digital, and so they had to be extremely choosy with setting up their shots, getting everything ready. And from what I understand, most of this stuff is done in one take because they simply cannot afford to do a
Yes.
second take on
Yeah.
film, which makes the achievement of following extremely impressive and extremely inspiring as a sort of aspiring filmmaker. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
now,
remember I was watching an interview and he was saying like they would film a little bit and then he'd have to go work his job to afford more film reel, and then they'd come back, a couple weekends later and film a little bit more, which is just something that we don't really think about in the digital age. But this is something, especially if you're trying to make a, independent film, how precious the film reel was and how, little margin of error that you would have. To your point, Joe, of like how they had to do everything right in one take.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing. And yeah, I mean, now, it's what a 64 gigabyte SD card is worth like $40 or something.
Yeah.
You can pick up several of those without it being too much of a thing. But the comparable amount of film would be, quite daunting, even for me in my situation in life right now. So it's truly impressive what they were able to do.
Yeah. So where would you place it?
So as an achievement of filmmaking, I find it really impressive and I would call it an A. However, story-wise, you can kind of tell it's a debut feature.
Yeah.
It's somewhat compelling, and I like the twist at the end.
Yeah.
Just to tell our viewers a little bit about it, it's about this student who is sort of lost in life, and he starts following people, just random people on the street. And one of the guys that he follows turns out to be a burglar who kind of turns on him, confronts him, and then brings him into his burglary business. And, events follow from there. There's a sort of a noir femme fatale character, a big heist that they've got to pull off and things. And it's told in Nolan's sort of trademark non-linear fashion. So there's
Yeah.
three different sort of timelines going on at the same time, and they all come together satisfyingly at the end. The twist is interesting at the end. However, it's not as compelling as perhaps it could be. So I would on the sort of just merits of it, if this was a Hollywood film and I knew nothing about the production and just popped it on, I would probably give it a C. So
Yeah.
I would split the difference, A for the filmmaking achievement, C for the story, and I would put it in B tier.
Yeah, I'd probably put it in C. I mean, it's been a bit since I've seen it, but I remember enjoying it. It was also just like cool to like this was at the time I watched it, it was the only one I hadn't seen before Tenet and Oppenheimer came out. So it's cool to just kind of like go back to the beginning after having seen all of his later movies and then seeing some of that DNA. Like there's a character named Cobb, like in Inception, and he's a thief. And just yeah, his editing style, the nonlinear. Yeah, and also it's interesting to see Nolan with Oppenheimer using all those black and white scenes and then kind of coming back to that. Yeah, so I enjoyed it, but in terms of, I kind of if you I think might have mentioned this during our Star Wars ranking video. I rate movies pretty high in rewatchability, and this is one that I have been interested in revisiting, but in the 4 5 years since I've seen it, I have not once actually felt motivated to. But yeah, it's a decent student film. But I would probably put it around C.
I would agree
But
with you
for
on rewatchability, Sam. I think this is the one Nolan film that I don't think I'll ever be compelled to go back and revisit. Even the one film that I legitimately hate of his, I would go
Yeah,
back and I would retry. But following, I would agree with your take that it's not very rewatchable.
yeah. So I guess would we agree to put it in C or either low B or high C?
What do you think, Cameron?
Well, I haven't actually seen this one, so unfortunately, my vote wouldn't really be helpful here.
I would be happy with high C, Sam,
High
if you
C.
want to put it
Okay.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, there you go. Our first one, high C, following. But yeah, definitely recommend it though. I think it is on the Criterion channel. If you have that, I don't know how easy it is to find the physical copy of it. But yeah, it's especially if you're into Nolan, you'll see a lot of the DNA of his later films in it. So definitely worth watching if you're studying Nolan.
It is currently streaming on Apple TV and on Mubi, and you can rent it on Amazon, which is what I did, and it's only like $3.
There you go. All
I'll,
right.
I'll have I'll have Just Watch pulled up here for all these, so I can tell y'all where they're
Oh,
streaming.
sweet. Yeah. All right. Next up, Memento. Cameron, do you want to start us off with this one?
Yeah, so I saw this one pretty recently, kind of in preparation for this. This was like the last big Nolan film that I hadn't seen. And kind of the same with following, this is Nolan's DNA. You've got different storylines, it moving in different directions. From a conceptual point of view, it was a very fascinating film. It's something I really appreciated, something that, you're challenged, you're trying to make sense of it along with the character. kind of a summary of what happens is there's a character with amnesia, and he forgets everything after about maybe 10 minutes. So he's trying to piece together evidence to point to the killer of his wife, because his wife got murdered. And so it kind of starts in medias res, and there's a timeline going backwards and a timeline going forwards. So a lot of interesting things. I've seen videos of Nolan kind of explaining the story arc with a whiteboard. From a kind of structural perspective, I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, from the character and just general story perspective, and then kind of the conclusion, I did not find very satisfying. It was more of a kind of an intellectual exercise rather than something that I found entertaining or necessarily rewatchable. A lot of interesting ideas, but I just didn't connect with the characters, and I really, at the end, I did not find that it was a very satisfying wrap up. So it kind of left me, at the end of it, I was like, well, is that it? Like, I was expecting some really big, like, light bulb moment or some big twist or reveal. And it just, I don't know, kind of, to me, it felt like it petered out a little bit. So you could definitely tell he's got some really fascinating ideas that he's working through. The multiple timelines, and just playing with time in general. But I kind of found the whole amnesia bit a little gimmicky after a while. Like, it was interesting in the beginning, but by the end, I'm like, all right, like this is kind of a crutch maybe that he's leaning on to just propel the plot forward, in my opinion. So I don't know. It was an interesting watch, but I didn't really enjoy it that much. But I did appreciate the kind of the structure that he was playing with, and just where he goes from there. Like, he's definitely, the DNA is being solidified of a storyteller who really likes to look at time in particular from an alternate view. So from that perspective, it's an interesting watch, but I didn't particularly enjoy it.
Yeah.
So where would I put it on the tier? I probably put it at a low B, high C.
Low B, high C.
Yeah, and you guys can probably hash out when you go through it, and we can kind of agree on
Yeah.
blend.
I would agree low B. I think I watched this one actually right before I watched Following. Like, it was like me finishing the Nolan movies. And I thought it was the obviously fascinating concept. I think I knew a little bit more somehow about the ending. Probably I had watched like a video essay or something. So I think I was prepared for for what the ending turned out to be. But I don't think I've ever seen a film like that since, and definitely hadn't seen a film like that before in terms of how it is structured. And it definitely makes you think, which I mean, most of these movies do, but this one, I mean, I'm just thinking of the image of Nolan by the board explaining the plot structure, and he's like, it's going back and forth and whatnot. But I think Guy Pearce is very good in it. Yeah, I remember enjoying it, and I remember thinking I'm gonna enjoy this so much more when I watch it a second time. But again, I never ended up watching it a second time, which I have the DVD. I still could, but this one has never really called back to me. So low B, high C. I would agree with that, Cameron. But Joe, I know you have the strongest take on this one.
Yeah, I agree with everything Cameron said, but stronger.
Yeah.
When I watched it, and it's been probably almost 10 years at this point since I've seen it, I kind of hated it. The intellectual exercise felt just like a gimmick to me. And because it just was a gimmick and the characters did not connect with me, I I just didn't like it. I couldn't tell you from this sort of distance how I felt about the filmmaking or anything of it. Probably if I revisit it today, I would like it more than I remember hating it. But it felt like he kept whipping me around, like he was tricking me just for the sake of tricking me, almost lying to me, and as a matter of fact. And I like getting tricked. I love the Prestige, so we can talk about that one. But I don't like it feeling like the filmmaker is either lying or deliberately withholding information from me. And that's how I felt with Memento. Um, Me personally, I would put it in D tier, but I could get behind a high C right around following if that's how you guys feel.
I think maybe
Yeah.
mid C. I think if we were to so let's say following's a high C. I think the middle ground would be a mid C. So I think putting it almost below following, I think was probably the way to go.
Yeah.
I almost feel like this was his most nihilist film, um, just with the ending and
Yeah.
just it's asking a question of what is this guy's purpose, and the answer that the film gives, I found rather nihilist, at least in comparison to some of his other films.
Yeah, it's more like a 70s movie, honestly, like one of those a movie from that
Mhm.
era than anything that comes later.
Yeah.
I feel like most of the other ones are tinged with that, well, at least some, and I say most, I'm thinking one in particular that's not, but I say most of the other ones are tinged with some and maybe that is him coming more into the Hollywood, like I guess Hollywood endings, like kind of coming more into studio filmmaking. And
Mhm.
maybe now he's powerful enough to step out of that a little bit. But yeah, I would agree. It definitely feels like a film from a different era.
Yeah. I would say all of his films have a protagonist who's really searching for purpose.
Mhm.
In most of the films, they find that purpose. But in Memento and unfortunately in Oppenheimer,
Yeah.
I would say he goes a little bit more nihilistic, and
Yeah.
so that's why we're gonna have a long stretch here where I'm just gonna be praising his films to the stars.
Same.
But I am disturbed to see that sort of creeping back into his filmography recently.
Yeah. But all
We'll get
right.
there. We'll get there.
Yeah, no, we'll have a lot to praise very
Yeah.
soon.
Memento is
But
streaming basically everywhere, by the way. Prime Video, Peacock, Hoopla, Plex, Pluto TV. Plenty of places for you to find Memento.
yeah. All right. Insomnia. Joe, do you want to kick us off? I think you've seen this one probably the most recently of the three of us.
I probably have. Insomnia is if Memento feels like a 70s movie, Insomnia feels very much like a 90s movie. This is perhaps the least Nolan of all of Nolan's movies, kind of visually, and as far as story structure goes. However, I really think the themes and some of the things are there that bring us back to kind of some of the core ideas you see through Nolan's whole work. We have two Los Angeles detectives that are sent to go investigate a murder in Alaska. They're there in the summertime, and so the sun never sets in this particular town, and that is going to drive one of them a little bit crazy. And as they investigate this murder, where nothing is as it seems, none of our characters really are who they say they are, with the exception of the one sort of Girl Scout detective. But we get a really great performance out of Robin Williams, an excellent, chilling performance out of Robin Williams. Al Pacino's just kind of Al Pacino, but man,
Al Pacino.
yes, I don't think he's played a different character since like I don't know Dog Day Afternoon or something. But
Yeah.
anywho,
Yeah, where would you put it?
I would probably put Insomnia pretty solidly in B tier, because you can see from Insomnia that this is the guy who's going to direct the Batman movies. There's a lot of focus on justice, on purpose, on what it means to be a good cop, what the law is, whether or not you can bend the law to achieve an outcome that you know is just, but which if you play strictly by the rules, you won't be able to achieve. There's a lot of themes there, also themes of redemption and themes of staying in the light and not going too far into the dark. You see a lot of the things that will be fully fleshed out in the Batman trilogy already present here in Insomnia, and I can definitely tell why a studio exec who's thinking about who's going to direct the Batman trilogy would see this movie and say, yes, this Nolan kid, that's who we're gonna give the camera.
Yeah, and also interesting, this is the only Nolan movie to be a remake. It's a remake of a Norwegian thriller from a few years before. And also this is one of the rare ones where Nolan didn't really have input on the story. Like usually either he is a sole screenwriter, co-screenwriter, or has a story credit. Usually he's working if he's sharing it, he's usually sharing it with his brother or someone like David S. Goyer. So this is one that he definitely brings his style too. But at the same time, like it's funny to think because more people I think regard Memento as a classic, but that was one that was more like he had more control over because it was a lower budget, more independent film. It got picked up by studio. Whereas this one was kind of like he got dropped into a studio movie and like it was real test of the waters for him. Actually, Steven Soderbergh was the one who got him this gig and kind of like helped Nolan get to where he is now. This is one I watched like almost 10 years ago. I remember being a bit confused. I felt the plot was a little confusing, but then again, it was actually, I guess, towards the beginning of a lot of these movies in terms of, it might have been even before I saw The Prestige. I just had a DVD, found a DVD copy. But I remember the third act being really strong. I remember the movie gets, I guess it's a minor spoiler, but Robin Williams does not come into the film until a bit late in. And after that, I started to get engaged, and I remember being really like really into it by the time of the third act. But it takes a bit to get there. I think it's one I think I'd appreciate more now. But for now, I'd say like low B, high C for a rating. Which I think if Joe, if you were to give it a solid B, and I'd give it that rating, I think probably giving it a low B is the safest option here.
I'm good with that. Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll just drop it. It'll be our first one in the B's.
And that is streaming on Paramount Plus, Insomnia.
There you go. Everyone's favorite streaming service, Paramount
Exactly.
Plus. All right, Cameron, do you want to? I guess you've talked about Batman Begins a little bit, but you want to kick us off and
Yeah.
dive into where you'd place this?
So, this might be a hot take, but this is actually my favorite of the Batman films of Christopher Nolan. Maybe partially because of my kind of nostalgic connection with it, but I also just think that, some of the later ones, he really blows up the world and really expands it. But this one, I found that he's very focused on, especially, as Bruce Wayne is confronting his fear of bats and just working through the childhood trauma of, his parents dying. And I just found that it probably, in my kind of look at it, is most human story in terms of all the Batman. I know there's a lot of especially in Dark Knight, but just the seeing him go from childhood to an adult and working through all this and starting to embrace what he's supposed to become. I just really enjoyed it. I just the pared down focus that this film had, and also having the League of Shadows and some of those cool little episodes where he's coming into his own with Liam Neeson, for example. Just really interesting. So I would put this in a solid high A.
Yeah, yeah, I'd give it a solid A as well. This one had like such a big impact on me. Just like just like the whole story of just him kind of like um just kind of building his persona as Batman from the ground up and just like disappearing for 7 years, or I don't know, it was 5 or 7 years, but that just seems so cool to me. I was like, I wish I kind of want to do that, just disappear, go off the grid, and just return like as Batman. Like I just want to get super rich just so I can become Batman. But that's the thing. It made it so tangible. It was like, okay, this is something that you can actually do. Like you can actually become. It made it so grounded that I was like, for me, I
Yeah.
was like, this is actually something I could like. I'd have to get really rich, like obviously, but this is like something I could actually do.
Yeah,
And I
perhaps
think,
he was such a relatable and such a relatable character, seeing him go through that.
yeah,
Like some of these superhero movies, you're dropped in the middle and they got all the powers, and they
yeah,
try to throw some backstory in there. But yeah,
yeah.
really following him from the beginning made it really just relatable.
No, for sure. And I think I watched it around the same time I was super into Daredevil, like the first season when it came out in 2015. That's when I would have watched it. So I just like those grounded superheroes I was super into. But yeah, I think it's overall solid. Like it it I it's hard to say whether I like this or Dark Knight Rises more. I think this one is a bit more cohesive. Um, but overall, just great ensemble cast. I think yeah, this is the beginning of the beginning of Cillian Murphy's appearances in these movies. But just like almost had no right being as good as it was, like especially when you look into the history of them trying to get a Batman movie off the ground in the early 2000s. There were so many weird things that were kind of thrown at the wall, and the fact that they were to really nail it with this, and obviously this is because of this movie that people showed up in droves for the Dark Knight, and like Dark Knight ended up becoming like the highest grossing film weekend of all time. Like that doesn't happen unless people really like this movie. Um, so yeah, I'd say solid A. But Joe, what do you think?
S tier, baby.
S
This
tier.
movie's
Okay.
amazing. Definitely, I would agree with you guys that this is the best out of the Batman trilogy. It's so tight, so grounded, and so character driven and personal. Um, Bruce Wayne's sort of maturation and struggle into becoming a hero here is just awesome. Everything about his aesthetic, everything about the sort of hero's journey that he goes through. Um, I love I love the League of Shadows. I love Ra's al Ghul. I love all the different stuff that he's got to battle. His sort of winning the trust of Gordon, and we have a better Rachel here, by the way, as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Definitely, definitely prefer her over Dark Knight Rachel.
Yeah.
But I also I think the themes of it are really tight too. I watched a YouTube video once upon a time, and I couldn't find it before coming on tonight, but it showed that it was exploring the idea of fear from four different angles, personified by four different characters. You've got Bruce Wayne and Batman. Then you've got the way that Ra's al Ghul uses fear to control. You've got the mob boss, Carmine Falcone, the way
Yeah.
that he uses fear for his own sort of reasons. And then you've got the more chaotic Scarecrow use of fear. And the four different characters are all using fear for their different ends, and they get a different approach to inspiring that in people. And I thought that that was a really insightful way of kind of looking at the movie and looking at the themes once you want to dig a little bit deeper than just the sort of awesome Batman hero's journey that he goes on. I love Batman Begins. It's for me, it's a toss up between this one and Inception as to which of Nolan's movies is most rewatchable. I can't speak highly enough of this film.
Yeah. So I guess we'd probably put it in high, like probably one of our highest A's.
IA, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I think overall we all love this movie. Yeah, really one of the best superhero movies for sure. The Prestige. I'll kick this one off because I've seen this one probably more than even Inception, like more than any of these other ones. Because this is a movie I love to show people. When I want a movie to like really knock someone's socks off, I show them this movie. And I'm not going to spoil the twist ending, but it's a fantastic twist ending. And this is a movie that every single time I watch it, I discover something new that I did not before. But yeah, Hugh Jackman, Christian Bale, it's fantastic. Two leading men. Michael Caine is also great in it. But yeah, this is a fantastic movie. Um, yeah, and the themes of and even David Bowie's great in it. David Bowie plays Nikola Tesla in this, which you might not expect. But just the themes of scientific obsession, I think play so much better here than they do in Oppenheimer later. Like I think there's a lot of DNA of this movie in Oppenheimer in terms of just like where Nolan's thoughts are about science and just like playing God and whatnot. But just so fascinating to me. Yeah, this is like it comes from an interesting era of Nolan before he like started going really big. I guess you could even though this movie does have a lot of scope and scale, you could call this the last of his smaller movies. It's a much more intimate cast, not as many big set pieces, but overall still stunning. And and it's like between this and Inception, as like people kind of view this as like the codex to Nolan's storytelling, because like as we'll see later in Inception, there's the analogy to be made between the main characters and like it's about making a film. And this one talks a lot about the three different parts of the magic trick, which end with the prestige. And there is something to that in terms of these films are all sort of magic tricks, and especially in the sense that they are all almost all shot. Everything within them, almost everything is shot completely within camera. There's very even though a few of these films have some CGI in them, there's almost very little green screen to be found in any of these films. Um, so these films, and I think as a key to his appeal at large is that he's a magician. And it's like we'll talk a little bit later about what he's doing with the Odyssey, but there's some jokes around like whether he's going to resurrect real monsters. But it is always going in. You wonder how is he going to do the bomb in Oppenheimer? How is he going to do this? Almost like very comparable to going into a new Tom Cruise movie. Um, yeah, these all of his films in a sense are real magic tricks, and that's what people keep coming back to them for. It's just how did he do that without like CGI? How did he do that? So yeah, really love The Prestige. It's an S tier one for me.
I would definitely put it in A tier, high A. Prestige is an excellent film, very well crafted. And whereas before, like I said in when I was talking about Memento, I felt like I was being lied to, like information was being held from me sort of almost maliciously. In The Prestige, it does feel like a magic trick. There's certain things that I just accept I can't see yet because it would ruin the trick. And once they do all kind of come out, and once all the cards are on the table, you can marvel at the structure and at the beauty of the trick. Um, but again, at the heart of it is a interpersonal conflict between two very compelling characters. Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale's rivalry and obsession in different ways with beating the other really drives the film forward on sort of an emotional and a moral level. And that's something that I think Memento was missing. Um, and it's something that I really appreciate about The Prestige. Michael Caine is also really good in
Yeah,
The Prestige. But every performance is pretty much perfect. The atmosphere of the whole late 1800s kind of milieu that the film is set in is gorgeous. I think it's Nolan's only period piece. Well, besides Dunkirk and I guess Oppenheimer now, but going back even kind of older than those two, which only stretch back to the 30s and 40s. I think he knocked it out of the park. I'd give this one a pretty high A.
yeah,
Yeah, just looking at it from a kind of a momentum pacing perspective, you guys hit on a lot of really good things. The thing that's really stuck out to me was, I think, there's the famous Nolan twist and what's going to be revealed at the end. And I personally felt this was the most satisfying and the most just absolutely mind blowing. Some of those other films are grand in scale and really make you think philosophically. But this one, it's the momentum is just high octane from the beginning. Your pulse is pounding. You're completely invested in the film. And the end is just magnificent. The final twist. So I remember just being hooked from minute one through the end. It I need to see this again. It's been almost 10 years as well. But I would certainly put this as a high A.
yeah. Okay, so this one's sort of, I think we'll just put it right next to Batman Begins. I feel like they probably are in this. They're probably tied for this
Yeah.
high A position.
Yeah. The Prestige is streaming on Hulu.
Yeah,
So, if you want to watch all of Nolan's films, I guess you're going to have to basically buy a cable package for all the streaming services you're going to need.
yeah. Yeah. I guess there's no Nolan box set yet.
Yet.
Um,
Oh, there will be.
yeah, I hope so. All right, The Dark Knight. Um, Joe, you want to kick us off on this one?
The Dark Knight. This is probably Nolan's most famous film. It's certainly his highest rated on Letterboxd. And in my mind, it is the least awesome of the Batman trilogy. I don't want to say weakest because The Dark Knight is not a weak film by any means. But I like the other two better, which is sort of a controversial opinion, I suppose. But I think the further and further we get away from just the utter hype of this movie, the more that point of view will be appreciated. Heath Ledger's Joker is one of the all-time great cinematic characters. His confrontation with Bruce Wayne and just the fact that he is basically Batman's complete opposite, the whole other side of the coin, really forcing Batman to confront his morality, draw out some of those themes that we saw in Insomnia of what is the right thing to do, how do you pursue justice while not succumbing to the dark side yourself. You get that both in Batman, in Commissioner Gordon, sort of in the Joker, honestly, because in his own twisted way, he's kind of pursuing a form of justice. But of course, most prominently in the character of Harvey Dent, who, well, let's say towards the end, he is facing both sides of the coin, Batman and the
Yeah.
Joker. And it's a really well-paced, really tight film, well directed, well acted. Everyone here is at kind of the top of their game. And perhaps if it wasn't so hyped up, I would prefer it to something like The Dark Knight Rises. But just because, again, on Letterboxd, it is currently the 22nd highest rated movie of all time. I
Wow.
don't think it's quite there. Like it's great, it's good, not quite that good. Famously did not win Best Picture. Was it even nominated for Best Picture?
I think it was because of the backlash of this not getting nominated. That partially is the reason why they added another slot, or they opened it up to 9 or 10 or whatever they turned it into
Yeah, that's right, because there were
nominees.
only five nominations in
Yeah,
'08.
yeah,
But yeah, it's an excellent film. I would give it an A, lower than Batman Begins or The Prestige, but definitely, that this is an excellent film.
yeah. This is a tough one for me, because it almost feels like it's the Raiders of the Lost Ark Last Crusade thing, where Raiders I know is objectively the better film. Um, but I love Last Crusade probably the most, and I've seen it the most. Where this one, I feel like I objectively, this is like I see this as the one I should be rating the highest. Um, but I've seen Batman Begins and Dark Knight Rises so many more times, so I feel like mid A is probably where I'm gonna go for it. But it is a great film. I feel like I have not really watched it though because I have not seen it in IMAX or like even in theaters. So I feel like this is one that is meant that even that I mean, I guess this is the point from where Nolan starts using IMAX. And um and just the things I've heard from people who've seen it in theaters, and there's so many scenes that I just think would go insane in IMAX. Especially any of the car chase scenes, or I guess bat pod chase scenes. Um yeah, this is the one, and there's a really great video essay actually by Patrick Willems on this, on Nolan in general, but also how his style changes after this movie, because he because obviously the technology for IMAX has come a long way. That now since then he's been able to put IMAX cameras on planes and boats and whatnot. And it seems like with every new movie, he's creating some sort of new IMAX technology, just to be able to get cameras to do more and more intricate things. But he had to sort of shift his whole style because of the aspect ratio of IMAX and IMAX screens. So his just there's a big shift between watching The Prestige and this film, and then going on to Inception, of just how he frames and how he shoots scenes. It's very fascinating. So this is one that I feel like probably is best enjoyed in theaters. But yeah, again, Heath Ledger's Joker, and Aaron Eckhart's Two-Face are fantastic villains. Yeah, it's no surprise what that this film essentially did so great that Nolan essentially has blank checks from here on out. even when he's at a different studio, he's got blank checks because of how crazy successful this was. And yeah, had a huge impact on the culture and superhero movies at large. Um, yeah, but yeah, this is the one I've seen the least though. But I still very much respect it. It is a really great, solid film. Um, but yeah, I'd put it around yeah, around mid A, I think. Yeah. Uh, Cameron, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of there with you. I remember when this came out. This was all anyone talked about. Everyone was saying, why so serious? Um,
Yeah.
I I was playing in summer camp leagues, and we were all quoting that, and the scene where he's like, "And here's my card."
Yeah.
So many memorable lines. Yeah, in terms of just like an impact on the culture, it's sometimes really hard to separate something like this to actually look at it objectively when you have such a context. And this is sitting at number 3 on the IMDb top 250 list. And I think probably Nolan's most memorable character, I would argue, would be the Heath Ledger Joker. Just in terms of acting, it's one of the most incredible performances ever to be put on screen. But again, I'm kind of there with you. Looking at the Batman trilogy, that when I look at those three movies, this is not the one that pops out to me. It's still the Dark Knight, or the Batman Begins. Um, it's a phenomenal film. I think there's a lot of universal themes. The theme of justice and morality. We had it on our list, number 26 on our recently completed 100 movies every Catholic should see list, and it certainly belongs there. But if I'm sitting down and doing this rating exercise, I ultimately I'm going to put it probably the bottom A tier. It's a phenomenal film. I recognize its mastery, but it's so hard when there's so many other good films
Yeah.
to compare it against.
Also, an interesting note, I don't know if you guys would agree on this, but I feel like I actually like, and Hans Zimmer has a great score for this, as he does for Dark Knight Rises, but I actually kind of like, I think it's Harry Gregson Williams. I actually kind of like his score a bit better for Batman Begins, especially because I rewatched that one recently, and I've always really loved the score, especially like there's a particular theme. Usually, I guess you could call it Thomas Wayne's theme, but usually when, especially at the beginning and whenever Bruce is thinking back to his childhood, that plays.
Yeah,
That is just a moving theme. And
yeah,
it's a little more subtle than anything you'll find in Dark Knight or Dark Knight Rises.
yeah.
But all have great scores. But I actually think, yeah, just on that note, yeah.
I remember I was as a kid, I was very into movie soundtracks, and I remember downloading this from iTunes, and it
Yeah.
very like it was not a melodic score at all. It was very dark and very visceral and kind of hard to listen to separate from the movie. Zimmer does a lot of interesting textures, but it's all mostly in the low bass. You got a lot of like string pizzicatos, and but it's very rhythmic. I mean, a lot of Zimmer scores are rhythmic, but this one was almost like there's a few quiet moments of piano, but it's mostly just a very visceral, rhythmic score. So it's definitely a very dark film. Not something that, if we're trying to introduce someone to Christopher Nolan, not something I would particularly recommend to be your first rodeo with Nolan.
Yeah. And this, I believe, I'm gonna just make sure I'm right on this. Oh, okay. No, this is the second movie he did with Lee Smith as his editor. The first one was The Prestige, I believe, unless it was Batman. Actually, let me just check. But I really think there's a shift because after this, Lee Smith edits Inception, Dark Knight Rises, Interstellar, and Dunkirk, I believe. Um, and I think like I can't I don't have the technical expertise to put my finger on it. But it is interesting that Tenet and Oppenheimer do not have Lee Smith as the editor, and those have some choices in them that I think just maybe just come from a different editor. Like the editor is a huge part of the filmmaking process, and when I try to put my finger on what is different about like this is definitely the key. This is one of Nolan. This is probably Nolan's best stretch of films, and I think editor Lee Smith is a big part of that. So I'd have to actually do my research and do a deep dive into Smith's editing choices, but yeah, here on out, I think I think a crucial element of the feel of these movies can definitely be credited to the editing. Okay, Lee Smith did do Batman Begins, so starts way back there, but just something I thought I'd mention since that's something I've noticed when going through his filmography before. Um,
So The Dark Knight, as well as Batman Begins and The Dark Knight Rises, all stream on HBO Max if you want to check them out. So yes, yet another new streaming service to add to
yeah,
the Nolan bonanza.
yeah.
You can do
So
a little counter graphic below.
Yeah.
How many
yeah,
streaming services do you need?
yeah. All right, so it's Inception time. Cameron, do you want to
Oh
start
man.
on this?
Yes.
This rightly is one of the best films of the 21st century.
Yeah.
It's just the the ability to combine there's so many kind of inspirations from James Bond to the Matrix that Nolan's pulling here to Mission Impossible. There's just so many different elements that he's drawing from to create something so unique and original, something with his own style, kind of harkening back to some of those old franchises, but also giving us something so new, something that we'd never seen before. I mean, I think that even from the trailer when it was released, there's like a sound effect in the trailer that has been mimicked ever since then. And just seeing this in theaters and is really our first exposure to the full on mature Nolan. Going back to following and Memento and some of those ideas of different layers of storytelling. This seems to be kind of the crescendo. This is him kind of reaching that tier of excellence that he's been writing ever since. But I think this is one of the best films ever made, in terms of just
Yeah.
being able to be accessible to a broad audience, but also being having so much complexity, such a masterful exercise of world building. Hans Zimmer's score for this is one of the best also. Just the use of he has a extra large brass ensemble and layering it on top of a drum ensemble. Just some of the effects that he was able to achieve. I just really think this is just, and the fact that this is a standalone film, this really represents like what the modern blockbuster, the thinking man's modern blockbuster. This is something that I really wish we saw more of, because this is really modern filmmaking with using some visual effects, but also just everything at your arsenal. This is just an excellent product, and I think yeah, one of the best films of this century. It'll go down in cinema history as certainly one of the best, and just being able to have that broad appeal. I loved it. It's absolute S tier for me.
Yeah.
I don't really know many people who hate this movie. It's just one of those movies that everyone's seen, everyone loves, everyone has an opinion on. Very, very rewatchable.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can't say enough good things about it.
I would agree with everything that you said. It's such a monumental achievement. It's definitely Nolan's best film. Um, in my mind, there's no question about that. There might be other films. Well, no, I won't even say that. I think that this is on a technical level his best film. Some of his best just cinematic accomplishment is here. On a storytelling level, it's his best film. The way that he builds this entire new world, several entire new worlds across this movie, without needing to bloat it into a franchise, without really taking the runtime too long, is, mind-boggling. But it all comes down to a very personal plot and conflict, right? Our lead Cobb, he takes on this job to jump into people's memories and try to implant ideas, the thing that they call inception. He takes on this job so that he can be free and live with his kids, you know? He's running from this guilt about what happened to his wife. Everything is very personal, very intimate, even when things are getting grand and sweeping. I think the supporting cast is great. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Tom Hardy, Ellen Page, Michael Caine, just fantastic cast. And Leonardo DiCaprio, I usually think is overrated, but he's not overrated here. He does an excellent, excellent job, and it kind of shows that with a director who can kind of restrain some of his worst tendencies, DiCaprio can put out just a really great, great performance. The VFX and the visuals of this are stunning. I know a lot of people try to talk about Nolan as someone who tries to do everything in camera, but I think rather what he does is he has a very intentional idea for the VFX that he's going to do. If he
Hmm.
can accomplish that in camera, he's going to do it. But even if he's going to use CGI, rather than it just being something where it's like, we'll figure it out in post, right from the very beginning, he knows what that image is going to be. And so there's an intentionality behind everything, which really elevates this movie. Definitely S tier.
Yeah, there's no Leonardo DiCaprio jumping around on a bunch of green blocks, and then they're just like, it's some. I'm hearing, some of the stories of making those Marvel movies now,
Yeah.
where
Hmm.
What they make
just
Christian Bale do, like
yeah,
in Love and Thunder. It's like, yeah, that's
Or
that's a
Ian
paycheck movie.
McKellen.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, tennis balls in a green room. Oh my goodness.
Breaking down. Yeah. But yeah, I'm gonna agree with all of you. This is it's an S tier, probably his best movie. I'm actually gonna take it back what I said about the dark. I mean, in a sense, it's a double-sided coin here, but I'd say the Inception success, especially it like almost hit 1 billion, was really like the Dark Knight like gave him like at least one more blank check, and that he used it on Inception, and the fact that Inception also did incredible, like not only did everyone go see it, but like it also like got nominated for like a ton of Oscars. This really gave him like almost like eternal blank checks, because it said it's an original movie. And this came out in 2010, so this is like before the real um, franchise overload where everything is a sequel. Especially like when you look at like the top 10, yeah, like the top 10 movies of 2019 are all like almost all Disney movies, and a bunch of them are like Disney remakes. It's really depressing. But this is just from like another era that like a movie like this could really succeed. And this is what movie making is all about. Like an original idea performed at the highest level. And Nolan has gone on the record saying like it seems like almost like a presumptuous thing to say, but he says he really looks at all of his movies. When he goes to make a movie, he's going to make the best movie of all time. Like, does he actually think that it's going to be the best movie of all time? Like, no, like but he goes into it with that intent. And I think that shows in so many of the movies he makes that are on this epic scale and just really shoot for the moon. But like, yeah, without this film and without its success, like you don't really have some of the even crazier swings to come. Um, but yeah, and I would even give DiCaprio a little more credit just because he came up with a lot of the ideas for the character, to have this tragic backstory and to have everything with Ma and trying to get back to his kids. Like he really, really pushed for that, because he really wanted something more for the character. I don't know exactly how much was already there before, but I'm glad that it was DiCaprio, and that he was able to add that much more heart, to the story that may be missing from some of the later films, in Nolan's filmography. But overall, I don't know how much more I can say on the film that you guys haven't already said. But yeah, I absolutely put this one right at the top. Glad this is the one that we're all agreeing on for S tier. So into S tier it goes.
Inception is not streaming anywhere, so you'll just have to rent it. Sorry.
Really? Not even on Max?
Nope, nowhere.
Yeah.
Well,
Gotta buy physical media.
yeah, you
Exactly. Get your
it's
DVD copy.
very, very popular at thrift stores.
Yes.
Yeah, it
Someone
is.
who's in thrift stores looking for movies a lot.
All right. DKR, Dark Knight Rises.
Sam,
Joe,
I think you should take this one because I
oh,
feel
really?
like you love this more than anyone else.
I do love it. Whether or not I put it above the other ones, I don't know. I honestly, I feel like all three movies are actually pretty close for me. Um, but I do really love Dark Knight Rises, and I've been a big advocate for it. I guess when by the time I watched it, it was about 3 or 4 years since it had come out, and yeah, there was so much comparison to The Dark Knight, and that's why sometimes you should you should you shouldn't just follow along with the trends of what people are saying online. I think there are some valid critiques, especially towards the ending, to be made about this film, but it still delivers on so many levels. It's extremely ambitious, probably the most ambitious of the three. I mean, definitely the highest, the biggest budget, and that's very clear from the opening scene, which is all done for real, of a plane hijacking another plane. I really, really love Tom Hardy as Bane. I mean, I think that's really what drew me to watch this even before The Dark Knight, because I just started seeing all these things online about Bane, even if they were like kind of meme clips of like someone doing an impression of him. But I just am so fascinated. I mean, as someone who just loves Star Wars and loves Darth Vader, like I think this is the closest you get to a Darth Vader type character. And just like, and there's some people that complain, like, I can't really understand what he's saying at some points. But I just think that just adds so much to his mystique. And I know Tom Hardy approaches his characters a lot of times by choosing a voice for them first, and it definitely shows here. But yeah, I think it's a satisfying ending to the trilogy. Yeah, I love Joseph Gordon-Levitt in it too, even if some people think the reveal at the end is silly about him. Um, but yeah, this one delivers on and just the message and theme of hope. I think I remember reading something about like what the main themes were for each movie, and yeah, the first one is fear. The second one, I don't remember what the core theme was for that one, but
Maybe
the
something
theme
like
for this,
control or chaos. I'm trying to
yeah, chaos. Maybe you had radiant and chaos,
yeah.
or just like almost like duality. But this one is hope. And this one is just it's just a super inspiring story, even more so than I think the other two. Of just lifting yourself up at your darkest moment. Yeah, this one is yeah, just the added layer of this being an adaptation of The Tale of Two Cities is just super cool. So yeah, Dark Knight Rises, two thumbs up from me. I'd probably still put it below Dark Knight, or even honestly on the same level, but for different reasons. But so I'd put, but still A, very solid A for me.
Yeah, A for me too. Um, I think in my personal ranking, I have the two right next to each other at
Yeah,
Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises. And, The Dark Knight is objectively a better film on a lot of levels. And so that's why I would give it the edge. But I would put Dark Knight Rises in A. There's a lot in that movie. Like I said, a lot of these Nolan films are about a character who is trying to find themselves. You see it in The Prestige and Inception, but most in the Batman movie. And Dark Knight Rises is where Batman actually finds himself.
yeah,
And in doing so, he abandons the persona that he's got, the Batman. It takes him, getting his back broken and dropped in a prison hole to do that, but he does. The theme of hope is really strong in this one. The image you bring up as a adaptation of Tale of Two Cities. The image of Killian Murphy's Scarecrow standing atop like a barricade, upholding judgment over people, just sticks with me for some reason. This character who, we thought was defeated in the first movie makes sort of a side appearance in Dark Knight and is now back and sort of in power in this second movie and fully unhinged. I love it. But the hope that Batman can bring, the way that even when things are really out of control, even when the whole city's police force is trapped in the sewers,
Yeah.
that hope is what can bring people back together and can finally vanquish evil, as long as you don't accidentally sleep with your dead mentor slash enemy's daughter. That's not a good look.
Yeah. That's actually a great point that you bring up about just like hanging up the cowl. Because you just don't see that in like almost any superhero movie. That's something I never really thought about until now.
Steve Rogers
Um,
is the only one in Marvel who does it.
yeah, but
After a lot more movies than Bruce
oh,
Wayne went
well,
through.
I was
But
gonna say we'll see how long that lasts. I
well,
don't know.
I think
But just
that
the
iteration of Steve Rogers is done. We're gonna see Chris Evans, Captain America, or Captain Hydra, or whatever in a Doomsday movie one of these days. But
I'll just say in the story arc in the comics where he does age up, there is shenanigans to age him down. That's why so I don't know. I just
oh
will never put
goodness.
it past him. But yeah, just the finality of this story is just very refreshing. But
Mm.
Cameron, what do you think?
Oh man. So I guess just I when I saw this, I was on a plane, so that already is going to color a little bit of my perception of this. I
I
I
think you
think
just killed Nolan. He had a heart attack.
yeah, watching it as the director intended,
Yeah.
with one earbud on a loud plane.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think just from looking at it broadly, I think it's a little messy. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of good to it, as you guys have alluded to. But I just remember when I watching it, there were so many different elements. It felt almost too bloated in certain sense. Like that sometimes happens, in the end of a trilogy where you're building up everything and then at the end you just let it loose. And I feel like perhaps a little bit in this one it got a little messy. There was multiple things going on, different characters, story arcs, etc. So I think it's a very solid film. I think it works well in the trilogy. But when I'm looking at the trilogy of Batman's, I'm immediately looking at Batman Begins and then Dark Knight and then then the final chapter. Perhaps if I rewatch it now, I'll probably appreciate it more. But just from my recollection of seeing it, it's just so hard when you're comparing it against two other just excellent
Yeah.
films. I think it's just going to suffer no matter what. It's going to be this is you know tiers above most of the other superhero movies we're getting these days or have gotten. But it's just when we're looking at it in the context of Nolan and some of these other films, and particularly the other Batman films, it's the weakest to me. I would put it high B.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally valid. Um, I think the probably just put it right at the end of A. It's
Yeah.
probably the mean between our three. Okay, sweet. On to Interstellar. Joe, you want to start us off with this one?
Sure. In Interstellar, Earth is dying, and we've got to find a way to get off. And sort of humanity's last hope comes down to a retired spaceship pilot who's gonna go out. His name's Coop. Coop, whose initials are JC, is sent on a mission to go find these 12 people who have been sent on the Lazarus Project to try to find other habitable planets, one of whom he will raise from the dead. And then he will ultimately have to struggle to find his way back to humanity after time-bending shenanigans occur. Interstellar is possibly Nolan's most visually stunning film. I don't know that it's always his most visually cohesive, but it's one of those where if you were to turn the sound off and just watch the sequence of images flash across the screen, you would be stunned by the beauty of it. Add Hans Zimmer's score, which is excellent. Add the performances. I love Matthew McConaughey in this movie. Anne Hathaway's all right. Matt Damon is very good. Michael Caine is always very good. I forget who plays the daughter, both as a girl and as an
Yeah.
adult. But
Oh,
she's
Jessica
Jessica
Chastain.
Chastain.
Jessica Chastain as an adult. That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's quite good. Um, Again, coming down to the heart of the movie being this father-daughter relationship. It's something that we saw in Inception, where Cobb's kids were a driving force. Once again, here with Coop, his daughter and the sort of love that he has for his daughter is transcends space and time, and it's one of those forces that beyond all hope is going to actually help save humanity. When I first watched it, I was blown away by it. I had some reservations about it completely from like a moral perspective. It felt very much like the message of the story was that man has to become God in order to save itself, which of course is extremely close to the sort of Catholic perspective on the way the world works. But instead, God has to become man in order to save us. So I think I called it, what did I say? Something like one of the greatest blasphemies simply because it's so close to the truth. And I admire and respect it on all sorts of levels for that. And I think it really can point towards that greater truth once you kind of move past the face value of the story. It's one I've wanted to return to for a while, and I think I probably will pretty soon now that I've finished the rest of Nolan's filmography and can come back to it. It does everything I think that Oppenheimer tries to do, but better.
Mm.
It shows the sort of positive, heroic side of the coin that Oppenheimer shows sort of the more tragic and vicious side of. And so I very much enjoy it. I would probably put Interstellar either in high A or low S tier.
Yeah. Yeah, this is honestly, I think before I rewatched it in IMAX in the fall, I might have put it even in high A because I remember rewatching it a few years before, just on a TV, so maybe that was why. Um, and just thinking like this, yeah, it's good. Like I still really like it, but I mean, I don't know, maybe I just wasn't in the right mood or whatnot. But I just remember walking away from it, just being like, yeah, that was really good. And I didn't watch it for a few years after just because like it always just felt like a lot to like just sit down and get into. But man, rewatching it in IMAX, I re-understood why I loved it so much. And just seeing how it played, that audience was rapt at attention and like was just like almost like holding their breath for every scene. And so that whenever Tars says something funny, or like even like the smallest jokes, like landed huge because it was almost like people were just like exhaling, they were so like tense, just like watching it, just like in awe. Yeah, but this one, just this is yeah, solid S tier for me. Just in terms of scope. I also just think the ideas are so fascinating and I think are well executed. Whether whether the pro-life message is sort of intentional or not, that kind of comes out of it in terms of the choices the characters make to save humanity, versus maybe other ways to save humanity that are not, that would sort of leave everyone else on the planet. Yeah, just fantastic film. And this is probably my favorite Hans Zimmer score like ever. One of the like definitely a top 10 score. Just truly, yeah, just truly inspiring and amazing that, what no it's almost more impressive what Nolan can do outside of pre-established material, whether he's working from history or comics or whatnot. It's more impressive what he does outside of that. Just yeah, phenomenal original science fiction film. Um, yeah, one for the ages, a classic.
Yeah, this is Nolan's most religious film, and it's his most poignant, um, just gut-wrenching character drama. It's I saw this in theaters and was absolutely just stunned by it. I'm very glad that the first time I saw it was in theaters. This is what art, this is what cinema, this is what cinema should be, and this is truly one of um, the high points of the 21st century, which I know I just said about Inception, but I think I loved Inception, obviously, but I think this one, in my perspective, is higher simply because it's grappling with the even bigger questions. It may not be as tight as Inception, but in terms of just grandiosity and beauty, and just incredible. Not only the cinematography, the various planets we're visiting, the the wormhole sequence, which is just so cool to see. One of my favorite scenes of all film. I love this film. I think this and Inception are just two of the best films that we've some of the two of the best films we've gotten in the 21st century, along with a few others. But I love this film. It's everything I could want in a film. Science fiction. It's a genre I love, but this is just one of the best that we've seen. The acting, Matthew McConaughey is absolutely gives it such a performance. You really are feeling his heartache when he's crying in the spaceship,
Mm.
realizing that he might not see his daughter again. Like that's just truly heartbreaking. Something I feel more now as a parent, but it's just something that he goes so big in the same time so small. We're looking into the edges of the universe, but we're also looking into the depths of the human heart. It's just something that sometimes you have to look to the fringes of our known world to really look into yourself. And again, I can't praise this one enough. Along with Inception, this is the score. I was listening to this for years and years after. I still listen to it. It's just phenomenal. The way that Hans Zimmer really channeled that sense of religiosity by bringing in a church organ, something you don't really hear that much in the score. Just I think all these different elements kind of brought together to create such a profound and incredible experience.
Yeah.
So definitely, as I would put it above Inception in my ranking.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think we just put it right here, right below. Um, yeah, we got Inception and Interstellar
Yeah,
as our two S tier. I think that's completely valid.
yeah,
Um, all right, Dunkirk. I'll kick this one off. Yeah, I really, really like Dunkirk. I would now put it in S tier. But I probably put it above Batman Begins and put it in the highest A tier. This is such a cool movie. It's just a really unique way in portraying a historic event. Um, that it can be off-putting to some people that it almost doesn't have a main character and that you're not necessarily following along, kind of like Saving Private Ryan, following along, um, maybe more emotionally so with any one character or one group of characters. There's characters that are kind of disparate, but I think this is one of the most unique examples of really just putting you in to history, and showing you the significance of the event and really just putting you in the position that all these soldiers were in, and just putting you in the thick of it, whether it's on the beaches, in the sky, on the boats. Um, yeah, and it's just like right from the beginning, it just goes and doesn't let you go right until the end. Um, Yeah, and it's mainly a cast of relative unknowns. I mean, you got Harry Styles thrown in, and he actually gives a decent performance. Um, you got Tom Hardy, and Tom Hardy's great. Again, wearing a mask, kind of a bit muffled, but yeah, just the commitment to accuracy. But and oh yeah, and Cillian Murphy's in it too. I always kind of forget that he's in it. Um, but yeah, it's not really a film of stars, but it is a film that is very much just heavily researched and just some of Nolan's finest craftsmanship. Um, and the nonlinear structure is very unique, and it all kind of comes together. Um, but as yeah, it's almost the most experimental of his films, in my opinion. Um, but it really, really landed for me when I saw it in IMAX. And it has continued to land for me on subsequent viewings that you could just kind of drop yourself right back in. Oh, and Mark Rylance is in it too. Really great. Oh, this is beginning of I don't know how to say his last name. Barry Keegan. I think it's Keegan.
Yeah,
Uh,
Keegan.
Keegan's career too. He kind of got a start, or at least he got a big boost from this one. Um, but overall, yeah, I really, really love this one. But so yeah, I'd put it in high A. What do you guys think?
Yeah, this was an interesting one. The the thing that really stood out to me was again just his commitment to no CGI. So for those scenes in with the Spitfires flying and then the Spitfire burning on the beach, and I think that's something in a lot of historical films people can get lazy. They show the big blockade of ships on the beach and thousands of troops marching, and you can kind of tell that's CGI. But that was something that when I saw this in theaters, that really stuck out to me. It felt very real. Um, I love Dunkirk. It's a very cool historical episode. So I was absolutely thrilled when he decided to tackle this. The multiple storylines, I think, and this is my opinion, maybe had it was a bit of a detriment overall to the film. It was maybe didn't quite feel like it fit the genre. A lot of historical films, you want something a little bit more straightforward, a little less kind of experimental. So I'm not sure for me that landed. Yeah, certainly an interesting concept again, but almost a little bit felt like Memento, like he was trying out some interesting ideas. It's certainly interesting to look at, but from a narrative thrust, I think that perhaps detracted a little bit from me. Still very rewatchable, very
Yeah.
very well done film. But from an emotional um, perspective, you've got the characters on the boat, the father and the son. Yeah, I love that part. Maybe a little too late. Um, I think he really kind of tried to put that in there towards the end to make us feel that the human connection there.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's an excellent film. I don't think it's. I personally would probably put it high B.
Yeah.
Certainly something that I'll rewatch and show people, but I don't think it's a masterpiece.
Gotcha.
I would kind of agree with that as well, Cameron. I very much enjoyed it. I think it's one of the most masterfully crafted war films that I've ever seen. But it didn't emotionally resonate with me as much as I think it could have, except for, well, the timeline, the storyline on the boat emotionally resonated. The storyline with the pilots in the air resonated. The stuff on the beach didn't so much. And I
Hmm.
don't know if it's because our soldiers we follow aren't necessarily the most heroic people.
Harry Styles.
Harry Styles probably has something to do with it. I certainly think his smirking face. But then Kenneth Branagh shows up, and I love Kenneth Branagh, so
Oh
I
yeah.
forgave a good bit there. But I really liked how everything comes down to the fact that we don't have a main character, a protagonist per se, means that there's not one big act of heroism. There isn't one person who this whole thing is on their shoulders to get the guys off the beach at Dunkirk. Instead, it's little acts of heroism that end up adding up to the victory here and to getting people off the beach, to saving people's lives. And it's little acts of selfishness that threaten that, um, depending on wherever they are at any certain point. Your choice between being heroic and selfless or selfish is what's going to determine whether this encounter goes well or poorly. And for the most part, people were heroic, but there were a couple of instances where people were selfish and somebody died because of it. Um, and I really liked that kind of framing on a battle, because in a real battle it's very much like that. You're not going to have one heroic person. You're not going to have an Achilles come out and win the war in one day, by himself. It's going to be all these little moments that add up to something big and something,
Hmm.
really beautiful. And I do like that about Dunkirk. I would probably borderline between the A and B tiers for me. Like I said, it didn't emotionally resonate as much, and that's gonna be my big gripe about Oppenheimer and Tenet, actually, is that they didn't emotionally resonate as much. They didn't have the core that the run from Batman Begins through Interstellar really had. Um, but I definitely still like Dunkirk quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'd say high B is probably the consensus there.
Yeah.
Um, okay. All right. Tenet. Uh, Cameron, you want to kick us off with Tenet?
Yes, Tenet is kind of felt like a science experiment, but it was so much fun. It was
Yeah.
it was it kind of was like, all right, this is he's he made Inception. Let's see what he's kind of taking a similar setting, of kind of modern future setting and warping time. Um, Inception was a lot easier to follow. Tenet, um, you know, I struggled in certain scenes to kind of grasp what was going on. It was definitely a swing to the fences. It was definitely something that felt it could have almost been a better scientific paper. However,
Yeah.
that being said, I really appreciated the originality and just he's trying to start again, try to look at something completely new. He's looking at the same concept of time, but he's looking at it in a completely different perspective than Inception. And I would say probably the most original look at the notion of time that I've seen in a while in a movie. And I also something that was really kind of fresh about this was Ludwig Göransson came on,
Oh
the new
yeah.
composer who's now collaborating with Nolan, and I think he brought a very fresh energy to the score. I mean, you from the opening scene, that rainy night in Tallinn, the opera and all the soldiers burst in, and the score is just pulsing from the beginning. It's kind of like a spy thriller in some ways. You got a lot of different things going on. So I guess I look at this fondly, perhaps more than it should. It was the one movie that came out in COVID. It was a glimmer of hope, or the first time we all went back to theaters in August of 2020 is the first time that I
Yeah.
stepped in a movie theater since January of 2020. So it kind of felt a little bit like a return to normalcy. And I also appreciated the fact that Nolan was insisting, in this age where everyone was going to streaming and not even bothering with a theatrical release, that he insisted on this should be seen in theaters, and 100% this should be seen in theaters. It's hard to imagine kind of sitting down on the TV with crummy speakers and trying to watch this and getting the same effect. So um yeah, I enjoyed it. This is actually probably the Nolan film I want to rewatch the most, just simply because there's so many things that I probably didn't pick up the first time, and I would love to see again. Robert Pattinson he was certainly a fun addition to the cast, and I love the sequence where they're crashing the 747 to the airport terminal. And I think there's also just from a kind of a religious Catholic theme of predestination and how you know different timelines, like how your actions today are you kind of locked into the actions of the future. So
Mm.
that was something that I thought was something that I could certainly dig into more, something I want to look at when I rewatch it, because I think there's something there, definitely kind of beneath the surface. But yeah, it's hard to kind of rate it.
Yeah.
I kind of want to put it low, or low A, but it's probably going to end up in the B tier. So I'm going to put it high B. I would put it above Dunkirk in my rating. So
Wow.
probably high B.
Okay. Yeah, this was just your point of Nolan's insistence on a theatrical release and how much almost of a relief it was to like see this released and during that crazy time. I was living in New York at the time and trekked out all the way out to New Jersey to see this one. So I really like this one. It's a guilty pleasure, I guess I would say. I think I would agree with a lot of the critiques levied against it. Like could it have that more um emotional core? I think it could, and I think they try to do that with Elizabeth Debicki's character. Um whether or not it completely succeeds, I don't know. And I think it would be a better film for it, but at the same time, I think this is an excellent action B movie. I think when you put it on that level, like I think it really stands out more. But yeah, it's just to me, it's just a fun movie of Nolan getting to do some fun backwards stuff. And I think the set pieces, particularly in the beginning and at the end, are fantastic. Um, yeah, also love Robert Pattinson as a supporting character. Yeah, Kenneth Branagh just kind of being goofy, the goofy Russian villain. Um, yeah, I mean, this is sort of the closest Nolan's come to making a straight. It's funny, Nolan's closest movie to making a straight Bond film is also his most convoluted, just because it's Nolan. That's almost how he has to be. But yeah, this is a fun one, and it's like almost a film I don't understand why I enjoy it as much as I do, and why I'd rather rewatch this one than maybe some other movies. But I do, and if someone puts it on, I will be there and I will watch it. But I would probably still put Dunkirk above it. But I would agree in the B category. I'd probably put it between Dunkirk and Insomnia. Um, but Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know that I can judge this one all that fairly. Um, because I only saw it once. I did go see it in theaters. Unlike y'all, my local theater in Texas never stopped playing movies. They just re-released old movies. So that
Oh
summer,
yeah.
I feasted. I got to see Back to the Future in theaters. I saw Inception. I saw Lord of the Rings. It was great. And so it wasn't one of those like, oh, this is the first time I've been back in theaters since January kind of
Yeah.
experiences. On top of that, my showing had a bit of a technical glitch. And
No.
so
Uh-oh.
the already difficult to understand like the sound mixing is already like notoriously bad on Tenet. It was almost impossible to understand the dialogue in my one showing.
Oof.
So I want to rewatch it. From what I remember, the idea of it was very interesting. I thought the execution was strange and hard to follow, and not having the dialogue made it even more hard to follow. So,
Mm,
unlike Interstellar, which I think you could watch silent and it would still make sense, Tenet, you really need to hear what's going on, and that's kind of hard to do.
yeah.
Um, but you mentioned the set pieces. The set pieces in the art holding space at the airport hangar, and then at the end when they're invading that whatever it is, old Russian city. Um, very cool. Very much liked the visuals on those. Um, if you were to put a gun into my head and make me choose, I'd probably put it high C, low B, but I don't think that
Mm,
that's really fair for me to judge just because my experience of seeing it has been poor. I should really watch it again.
yeah. Yeah, it definitely is not a movie like even after three times that I'm still trying to figure out, which actually I think adds to its appeal a little bit that you can watch it again and get something more, and almost like keep solving the puzzle. But I think between high B and low B, just smack in the middle, I think right here is probably fair.
Yeah.
Um,
I've
all
been
right.
I've been slacking on the streaming, but Interstellar you can get on Netflix,
Oh
Hoopla,
yeah.
or Paramount Plus. Neither Dunkirk nor Tenet are currently on any streaming service, so you've got to rent or purchase those.
Yeah. And then we got Oppenheimer. Joe, you want to kick us off on this one?
Oppenheimer is a historical film telling the story of J. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb. It follows him from his days in school through his work at Los Alamos on the Manhattan Project, and then wraps up with a lot of drama about a security clearance and a Senate confirmation hearing. Um, it is somewhat convoluted. It is definitely meant to be a tragedy, which means that our main character makes choices which are frustrating. It does not emotionally resonate. And overall, I thought that Nolan had explored these ideas better in Inception, in Interstellar, in The Prestige, in the Batman trilogy. I did not much care for Oppenheimer. It did not help that it felt like Nolan's least restrained movie. He felt like, whereas before he's been given a blank check and he's done amazing things with it, this is the one that felt like he went a little bit too far, especially from a Catholic perspective. Our multiple nude sex scenes just not something that I Nolan's never needed that before, and I don't think it
Yeah.
was necessary here either. And Oppenheimer, you definitely feel like he's got that God complex. I talked about in Interstellar this idea that man has to kind of reach for the heavens and become God to save humanity. Oppenheimer reaches to become God, but instead he creates a bomb. And that's kind of the central moral dilemma of this film, but it didn't feel very complex to me. And it wasn't very emotionally resonant. Now that I've been going through and talking about each of these films, and I'm seeing the importance of family and children in a lot of these movies, it's very notable that Robert Oppenheimer has an extremely dysfunctional family life. And I think that that's one of the keys that Nolan's giving to us of how this person's life is not rightly ordered, and he's tortured, both because of that and because of his sort of moral complicity with other things. So I did not care for Oppenheimer. It was so long that it was exhausting,
Yeah.
and I ended up cleansing my palate with an Alfred Hitchcock movie later that evening to kind of
Nice.
get it off my
Wonderful.
mind. Whereas every other Nolan film I want to think about for weeks afterwards, Oppenheimer I just wanted to get in the rearview mirror as quickly as possible. And it saddens me that it is to date seemingly his most successful movie, critically and commercially. But I really hope with the Odyssey that there's going to be a more return to some of the high points of his earlier films.
So where would you place it?
I would put it in C tier, ahead of Following, but only because cinematically speaking, Nolan is a much more mature filmmaker, and you can tell that he's a master. It's just a little too much for me.
Yeah. Well, I think you both know. You both know my opinion, which is I'd probably drop it in D. I do not like Oppenheimer. Um, I think it's got a lot going for it. I think Cillian Murphy definitely deserved the Oscar for Best Actor. I do think it's cool to have such a huge ensemble, especially for the purposes of placing stars or even just B-level stars in certain brief roles, just so you know, okay, this character is important. This historical figure is important. I
Like
think
Rami Malek,
Rami Malek, yeah.
he's like there in one scene in the background as like a guy's +1 to some event or something, and he doesn't have a word, doesn't say a word, and I'm like, wait a minute,
That's
that's
Rami
Rami
Malek.
Malek. Is this
Yeah.
just a random cameo, or is he going to be important later? And of course, he was important later. He gets one scene to shine, but it's like,
Yeah.
I I wonder why they cast an A-list actor in this complete background role here.
Yeah. And Josh from Drake and Josh makes an appearance. Like everyone and their mother appears in this. Benny Safdie is actually very good in this too. Really like his character. Um, but yeah, beyond the craft, which I think the craft is impeccable as always, I just think the storytelling falls short. I think just even like going from the idea of an Aristotelian tragedy, that the basic concept of that is you see a good man become bad. Um, and I just don't think there's a lot to convince you of his goodness from the beginning. I think there's definitely some reasons, like, I definitely think you see the struggle and you relate to some of the hard choices he has to make. But I don't think it sells you on him being a good character from the beginning, which I think is problematic. Like, I think with the Prestige, at the very least, with the most tragic of the characters is Hugh Jackman's character as Angier. Um, and at the very least, from the beginning, they establish that he's a man who loves his wife and that he has a good relationship with his wife, and that and when she passes away, like you understand why he goes down the route of tragedy that he does. Um,
Again,
and
family
you,
playing important role there. Like, I'm gonna have to write an essay on this. Anyway, carry on, Sam.
yeah, yeah, no, exactly. Um, so I think that is, and yeah, our good friend Dr. McInerney wrote a really good article in his blog about why it's essentially a dramatic failure. But yeah, it's overly long. I just remember walking out of it, um, and just thinking, this is not a movie I would ever see again. Which, like, sometimes when I walk out of a theater and say that, that's not necessarily the worst. thing, like depending on who made it. But like the fact that Nolan made it and like that was my first thought was just really sad to me. Um, so yeah, maybe down the line I'll watch it again, but I just don't think what Nolan has like essentially the core argument of this movie is nukes are bad. And beyond that, I just think we already all agreed on that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
that's a good point.
Um, and there's a lot just hinging on that, on trying to convince you of that. Um,
Yeah, it
yeah,
did feel like Nolan's only like message movie.
yeah, it
Yeah.
does.
It
Um, yeah, it's a message movie. I would completely agree. It falls into some of the same traps that contemporary Christian cinema falls into, which is very ironic. But I do think that's true. So again, like did this turn me off from Nolan completely? No. I think there's still so much of the same Nolan in there. I just don't agree with the choices he made this time around. And yeah, I'm still hopeful for the future, but this one was a real disappointment for me. But yeah. So Cameron, what did you think if you got around to this one?
Yeah, no, I saw this in theaters. And I remember walking out, I gave it a 4 stars. But it was one of those movies that kind of soured and as the more time I thought about it. Yeah, it was. I just the lead up. I feel like when I was watching it, the lead up to the nuclear bomb tests, that was something that that the way he did the crescendo to that scene was one of the most hyped I've ever felt in the theaters. Like I was on the edge of my seat, and then once we had the Trinity test, then I just feel like the rest of the film, it almost felt superfluous, pointless. Why do we care about Robert Downey Jr. and the trial? And yeah, to your point, it was just too long, and it was certainly an exhausting experience. Yeah, this is I'm have probably hardest time of all those films, just kind of thinking about where I would place this now. I certainly I look at it now, and I don't think I'll ever want to watch it again unless we all sit down and like, all right, we're
Yeah.
gonna reevaluate this. I the being in theaters, I it was there were certainly very enjoyable parts. To Joe's point, yeah, the whole sex nudity scenes, I think that was just kind of a shock for Christopher Nolan. It did not feel very Nolan. A lot of things didn't really feel Nolan in this film. Um, yeah, I don't know. I would probably probably gonna put it low B, high C. I mean, there were chunks of it that were excellent. I think you could make a film with the lead up to the atom bomb test, and I think that would be very interesting from this.
Yeah.
Um, it just seems like there was so much there was multiple movies, multiple things in here. Could it have been a Robert Downey vehicle at the end? I don't know, maybe. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it just doesn't feel very Nolan. It feels very mainstream, kind of, you know, it seems to fall somewhat in line with the whole, A24 Neon Studios, the
Hmm.
Oscar winners of recent years.
Yeah.
Um, Less of the enjoyable Nolan, more of the plotting Nolan. So yeah, I would put it probably low B, high C. On merit of its, the VFX, the cinematography were quite good. I thought that Cillian Murphy's performance was, as you said, he deserved the Oscar. Robert Downey Jr. in those superfluous scenes was fantastic. So a lot of some good elements, but ultimately just everything kind of gets washed into this overly long, um, convoluted, very, very uncharacteristic Nolan experience. So I think
Yeah.
there's probably a good movie in there if you trimmed out some things, but as it
Hmm.
is, not a huge fan, but also I do respect the filmmaking aspect of it.
Joe, did you also say high C
yes, I said high C on that one.
above following?
Above following, yeah.
Okay, so that's where we'll go. All right. Well, that concludes our list.
Um,
I guess we
just real
could,
quick,
yeah,
Oppenheimer streaming on Amazon Prime. Just throw that out there. And do we want to kind of forecast the Odyssey a little bit? Because I'm hyped for the Odyssey.
yeah. the Odyssey. Yeah, so in case you didn't already know, Christopher Nolan's next film that he is directing and writing is The Odyssey, and that is the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey, that he is adapting with Matt Damon as Odysseus, Tom Holland as Telemachus, and a, a great cast just beyond that, sort of matching like his Oppenheimer cast almost.
I've
And he
seen
is,
some people clowning on the cast a little bit, and I don't
yeah,
understand it. Like they're all talking about, oh, this cast is so political, and this is going to be, and I'm like, guys, it's a perfectly middlebrow Hollywood cast, the sort of thing that Nolan's been working with for years. Like if
yeah,
you're looking for a bunch of conservative actors, you're just not going to find that movie, you know? Um,
yeah,
I mean, Zendaya a little cringe. I'll give you
a little
that.
cringe,
Yeah.
Um,
yeah,
we'll have to see what he does with Ellen Page.
yeah.
But um, other than that, I'm super hyped. Matt Damon is not my first pick for Odysseus. Honestly, Ray Fiennes, who just played Odysseus in a movie earlier this
Oh, that
year,
was fantastic.
much
I
better.
just saw it. Yeah.
But I can buy Matt Damon as Odysseus if he's in the hand of a competent director, and Nolan is more than competent. So I'm really hyped for this one, and just to see an epic of that scale put back on screen, knowing what Nolan has done with time in his other movies and the theme of both the Iliad and the Odyssey, kind of talking about how to crib from Gladiator, our actions in life echo through eternity. I'm very interested to see where this one's going, and I will certainly be in the theaters on opening night for the Odyssey.
Yeah, and with Matt Damon's casting, like I agree. Like I think Nolan will be able to pull a great performance from him. But I think it's more his casting is more for the relatability of the character because I think it's so important that you do relate to him. And I think kind of what Matt Damon symbolizes to the American public is almost I don't want to say like Tom Hanks level.
It's Good
Um,
Will Hunting, right? Yeah,
yeah, it's Good Will Hunting, but also
Jason
like
Bourne, like just
the down to earth dad,
yeah.
and it's just like, would that be my first choice? Like I don't know, but I think weirdly subtextually his presence will help to sell the story to someone who's maybe not already sold on the Odyssey. Um, but yeah, no, overall, yeah, just looking so much forward to it. Just yeah, Nolan's currently literally in southern Greece in some of the actual locations from the book. So just completely nuts, like through the roof anticipation. But yeah,
yeah,
Cameron, what are you?
I'm yeah, 100% there. I mean, I've always, reading Iliad Odyssey as a kid, just imagining what those would be as a film. I tried to make a couple in high school myself for high school projects, but um, just imagining this in Nolan's hands and just looking at our lists, how many he has in A and S tier. I mean, how could you not be there on opening night? I'm really excited. I'm also a little bit, there's a little part of me that's, um, a little concerned. Are we going to get Oppenheimer Nolan? Are we going to get
Yeah,
other the good Nolan? Um, is he going to play into the whole Greek mythology being very kind of sexual, or is he going to play into the higher themes of afterlife and honor? We'll see. So I'm a little there's a little part of me that's
hmm
um, just reserved, but overall the concept is amazing. That all um, the pictures I've seen of people on set in front of old cities, like they were in Ait Ben Haddou and Morocco, which is where they filmed Gladiator, Kingdom of Heaven, Prince of Persia, The Man Who Would Be King. Lots of those epic historical movies. I actually got to go there a couple of years ago, so that was really cool. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be, if he sticks true to his vision, how he's done in these other films, I think it's going to be awesome. And honestly, it's a dream for a high school boy reading this. I think there's no other director who I would have wanted to have taken this on. So we'll see. I'm excited. Hopefully he's true to his vision.
And the good news
yeah,
is, as much as we didn't like Oppenheimer, that is another movie that gives him a blank check. And
Yeah.
so he will be able to make the Odyssey as he wants to do it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed this conversation. We're on our Instagram. We'll post the rankings plus our own personal rankings, just like we did for Star Wars. Um,
And if you're
but
listening to
yeah,
this in the podcast, we are going to post the video of this on YouTube, so you can follow along as we move our movies into the different tiers of the list.
yeah. All right. So this is Andre Catholic Movies Podcast signing off.